Mark was referring to episode 789 back on October 10th. Hopefully, you guys caught that episode because it was the turning point in the comeback player of the year market. I don't want to sit here and pat ourselves on the back and break our arm saying we influenced the market, blah, blah, blah. But we got to tell the truth. We did, because immediately after that show, people started having a heart attack about Sam Darnold being the favorite. Oh, the books are pulling the wool over the eyes of the bettors. Oh, the books didn't know. They're just as incompetent as the people who betting Sam Darnold were. So anyways, now we have this priced more correctly. It is not that Sam Darnold cannot win the award. He can. You can vote for whoever you want. These guys can vote for anyone they want for comeback. It was guidance from the Associated Press who said, hey, coming back from sucking, that's not what the spirit of this award is. And they clarified it. So now that we know, now everybody knows, I think now, Reynolds, we have a better look at what the market should have looked like pretty much all year. Sam Darnold is 25-1 on DraftKings. Kirk Cousins is the favorite at -150. You get Joe Burrow as a second choice at 4-1. I still have some thoughts on this market, Reynolds, but I'm curious what you think of it now that it's been reset to Darnold 25-1.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of passed on Darnold all year, so it makes sense where he's at now. Cousins makes sense on top of this list because team success with quarterbacks has been a factor in this race over the last decade plus, so he's where he should be. We'll talk about the MVP market soon, but from a statistical standpoint, Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow are the only guys having MVP caliber seasons, so he's in play, but Cincinnati's going to have to surge and probably make the playoffs for that to hit. Two other thoughts I have here is I do think the return of Nick Chubb kind of hurts J.K. Dobbins' chances from taking this down a little bit, because how do you pick between the two of them coming back from the injuries they have? And, DeMar Hamlin's an interesting situation, a unique situation where I don't think most players would qualify since, he did play a little bit last year, but that situation's so unique. And if, say, the Falcons stumble a little bit, I do think Hamlin has a shot to win this.
Yeah, I mean, Falcons losing games, it would obviously remove Kirk Cousins from being a favorite here. I think that matters a lot for Kirk Cousins. I have some thoughts, but I'll let you go first here, Mark, on comeback player of the year. What do you think of it now that the market has been reset a bit since we last talked?
I think it's fair that Kirk Cousins is the clear favorite here. Obviously, you have him going head to head as with Joe Burrow as the two quarterbacks up top, and just kind of the injury status for Kirk Cousins, coming back from a devastating Achilles injury, changing teams. Burrow just suffered a wrist injury. So I do think the edge there goes to Kirk Cousins. And then I think the Dobbins thing is still interesting at plus 600 on DraftKings. He's plus 800 at other spots. I think when we talked about this a month ago, he was around 15-1. So, I don't love necessarily hopping in at 6-1 or 8-1 here, but I do think he has the edge over Nick Chubb just because he's been playing this full season, has been a lot more successful. We've seen Chubb's efficiency dialed back quite a bit since he's returned. So if I was hopping into this market now, I think Dobbins would probably be my favorite bet on the board at 8-1 if you could get it. But for the most part, I'm happy with I think Ryan touted Kirk Cousins at 12-1 before his big blow up game against the Bucs a while back. So I think at that point, it's mostly a stay away for me adding in here.
All right. Let me ask you guys what you think about this. We know this injury now is supposed to be about coming back. This award now is supposed to be about coming back from injury. I would submit that not all injuries are created equal in the voters' heads. In other words, Joe Burrow, hurt his wrist. That's not that bad. Kirk Cousins blew out his Achilles. Yeah, but he's a pocket passer. He's almost 40 years old. He's a dad. Of course he blew out his Achilles. He's not doing anything out of this world. J.K. Dobbins has the best story to me, okay? He blew out 3 ligaments in his knee, came back. Blew out his Achilles last year, and now he's back. Now J.K. Dobbins is on pace for 267 carries, 44 catches, 1,500 total yards, and 13 touchdowns. And so I get that Nick Chubb coming back throws another running back into the mix. Nick Chubb has done nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing. He looks like a shell of himself, and the Browns are terrible. Meanwhile, the Chargers are going to win a ton of games this year. I mean, they're playing really good ball. So I still think that J.K. Dobbins is bettable at 8-1, 6-1. I think on DraftKings maybe a little thin, but if you can find those 8-1s on J.K. Dobbins, I have some longer numbers on Dobbins when Darnold was the favorite in this market. But I, like Mark, if I was coming to this market for the first time, I would not hate Dobbins in there as my first play to start building out a portfolio. I also agree with Reynolds that Damar Hamlin is still live. The reason that they went to the clarification is because everybody's like, oh my God, how can you not give it to Damar Hamlin, even though he didn't play? It's a feel-good award. It's let's make ourselves feel good, and making ourselves feel good is a vote for Damar Hamlin. So he's 9-1. I'm not sure if there's anything better than 9-1 out there than him on DraftKings, but yeah.
I think 10-1 on FanDuel is the best on Hamlin at this point.
Okay, so 10-1 on FanDuel, I still think is in play. For long shots in this market, I think that it's thin. The only ones that caught my eye were Tank Dell at 50-1. We still don't have Nico Collins back, and Steph Diggs is out for the year. You saw what happened against the Jets when that was the case. Tank Dell went nuts. Dude got shot and broke his leg. That's a pretty good story if he goes off for the rest of the year. It's going to be hard for me to think that Dell can sustain this all year, especially if/when Nico Collins comes back. And the one that we talked about last time, which I guess I got a bad number on because I took like 100-1 and 125-1. Now TJ Hawkinson is 150-1. I mean, it's gotten even longer on TJ Hawkinson. Now, it's not great. He's only going to play 8 full games, 7 full games here down the stretch. He's competing with Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson for targets. Maybe he can't have huge games, but man, you don't have to be right very often for 151 to get there on TJ Hawkinson. So that would be a very, very thin, but I think bettable long shot on Hawkinson. That is about it for me. Reynolds, what do you think of the take that not all injuries are created equal in this market? I really think that's an important aspect of this when talking about Dobbins versus these quarterbacks.
I definitely agree with you there. I mean, we went through this with Tua last year where we weren't sure if he counted or how they'd view it, and he's kind of in the same bucket as Burrow is this year. My one concern with Dobbins is that a running back hasn't won this award since Garrison Hurst in I think 2004.
Yeah.
But you're right. He does have a great story, a unique story. So, and the Chargers just have such a soft schedule, like they're going to win 10 plus games at this point.
Yeah, and people love. I mean, these writers, and think about what we're trying to do here. We're not trying to say who deserves it. We're trying to say who the writers are vote for. These guys have the full 3.9 for Harbaugh. They love Harbaugh. Harbaugh's like, oh, yeah, J.K. Dobbins, the man. They're like, oh, give me more Harbaugh, And so, if J.K. Dobbins just blew out his Achilles and that's it a year ago, or just blew out his ACL and that was it a year ago, I don't think it's as compelling of a story. But combined with the Chargers and nobody thought that they'd be good and Dobbins was left for dead by everyone, including me, yeah. All right. Anything else on comeback before we move on? All right. Let's kick it over to MVP now. My thought on this market, Reynolds, first of all, it's insanely liquid. We complain all the time about getting limited. You can't get a lot down. After our show that we did a month ago on this, I was like, you know what? Let me just see how much I can get on Derrick Henry, 151. I assumed it would be like 50 cents. No problem. I got $300 to win $45,000 on Derrick Henry at 150-1. No problem. I mean, if you have a bet in this market, you can actually really get down. The problem for me right now, Reynolds, is that I'm not seeing a ton here. I think that it's pretty efficient at the top. So what do you think about, you're not going to get, I guess, extreme long shots, or at least I don't see it right now. But anyways, Reynolds, what do you think about MVP right now?
Yeah, I have 2 long shots that aren't complete cross-offs, but I'm just going to quick hit everyone. First, Lamar Jackson's way ahead of where he was last year at the halfway point statistically, way ahead. Allen's within striking distance too. He gets a big opportunity against the Chiefs next week. Mahomes is off the pace, but they haven't lost a game, and there's not a lot of losses on the table going forward. So if they finish 14-3, 15-2, that's something that's going to hurt everyone else because, especially with Jackson, the Ravens are 4 games behind the Chiefs in terms of getting the number 1 seed. So I think they can. I think if the Ravens end up as the number 2 seed, they're fine. But if they end up as the 3rd or 4th, that becomes interesting, and I'm very curious to see how that shakes out. Goff's been super efficient, but he's off the pace. Statistically, he's throwing 20 passes a game for the most part. Mark's call with Jalen Hurts was a good one. They've been rolling Philly since you said that, Mark. He's a little bit behind in the production standpoint, but now they get a game against broken Dallas and a lot of good things happening there. I think they have a shot to end up as the number 1 seed in the NFC. Jaden Daniels is way behind in touchdowns, but they also have a shot to be the top seed in the conference. The big dog, Adam, normally I just maybe mention one skill player every year as maybe they have a shot. I thought Tyreek Hill, if he hit 2,000 yards, did. If Henry has 2,000 rushing yards and 20 touchdowns, this is going to be interesting. Where I think the real problem there is Jackson's the leader right now.
Yeah.
And then Joe Burrow, team success is the problem there. He's they'd have to break pattern from a team success standpoint for him to have a shot. And the two long shots I have is CJ Stroud's in a semi-interesting position. He's fallen off. They play the Lions in prime time this week. If Houston can go on a run, they have late season games against the Chiefs and the Ravens where he could potentially leapfrog them. And as we've talked about, late season bias is a factor in these races. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want to get involved in that, but there is a path there. And, Cousins. Cousins has had a few fringe MVP seasons statistically in his career. The Falcons aren't drawing dead at being the top seed in the NFC. I think if you want to go long, I think those are the only two guys that really have a shot.
Yeah, to me, it's not long enough on those guys. Stroud has been bad for the first half of the year, and to only get 25-1 on that, and Cousins is just not going to excite anyone. My concern on Hurts, and Hurts was certainly a good call for CLV. My concern on Hurts is that people are going to say Saquon's the reason this team is crushing, and Saquon's a big reason this team is absolutely smashing. Those are my concerns on that one. The other two that I kind of want to throw out at their cost, I don't think Patrick Mahomes is going to win it this year. There are so many years Patrick Mahomes is going to have better statistical numbers. I get they're only going to lose maybe 2, 1, 3 games or whatever. I still don't think that given the stats Mahomes is putting up, that he can really win it. And then Jaden Daniels, I think there is some bias from the voters. I can't vote for a rookie. He's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year anyways. We'll get to that in a second. But I can't vote for a rookie. So I've narrowed it down a lot here, Mark, where like guys I don't want to take. But I still don't feel really great about taking anyone, even if I throw those guys out. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd honestly cross off Jared Goff as well, just because his volume stats are not quite there. I was expecting him to be higher in pass TDs, and he's not even, in the top 5 there. He's 9th right now in pass TDs. So just with how good the Lions have been as a team and his individual passing statistics, obviously he adds nothing on the ground too, whereas guys like Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Hurts, you all get the rushing component there as well. So I do think the favorite should be Lamar and Josh Allen. Ryan mentioned that the Bills have a game against the Chiefs, and then they have a bye, and then they play the 49ers, Rams, and Lions. Those 4 straight games are all, pretty high strung games in the NFL. So I think if the Bills can win 3 out of 4 of those, then Josh Allen could potentially be the favorite here. But yeah, Lamar Jackson, I think deserves to be the favorite. And I don't necessarily know if I want to bet him at 3-1, but he leads all quarterbacks in rushing yards. The Ravens offense is second in the NFL in scoring. So I think the favorites are correct here. But yeah, I think Lamar and Josh Allen are pretty much the only two that I'd be willing to bet into right now, but they are the favorites.
Right, exactly. And so think about what happened last year. I didn't even think Lamar was having that great of a season last year. Then he beats Brock Purdy, I think it was like week 16 or something, and goes nuts. Then he puts like 6 touchdowns on the Dolphins in week 17, and it was over. It was just like a total runaway. So yeah, late definitely means more. The only thing that I would say here is I think voters do have fatigue in this market. Michael Jordan deserved the MVP every single year, just about, of his career. He did not win it every single year of his career. I think people get fatigued. Some of the voters get fatigued and saying, well, man, I don't know. Do we want to go back to Lamar again? Or do we really want to go back to Patrick Mahomes again? He's not even having that great of a year. I think Lamar is more deserving this year so far than he was last year by a wide margin. That doesn't mean that they'll vote for him. And so all that, goes back into the narrative that Lifetime Achievement Award for Derrick Henry, who's been a good dude and an incredible player in this league for 10 years. I would not bet Derrick Henry at 20-1. I probably wouldn't even bet Derrick Henry at 40-1 where he is, I know, on some sites. But yeah, I'm just praying to get unstuck Lifetime on Derrick Henry if he can somehow find his way into the winner's circle here. Anybody have any more comments here on MVP before we move on? Okay. Let's go to Offensive Rookie of the Year. This race has gone completely out of control. I was like, oh man, I am printing. I have Brock Bowers at 30-1. I have Malik Neighbors at like 20-1. I was like, oh man, we are printing here. Jaden Daniels is in the MVP of the NFL conversation. In fact, if someone told me they wanted to bet Jaden Daniels to be MVP, I would say, honestly, I think he might be the league's most valuable player or one of them. I do not think he will win the award because he is a rookie. So what you get is Jaden Daniels minus 1,400. I've seen minus 2,000. I've seen minus 3,000 on Jaden Daniels to be the Offensive Rookie of the Year. It seems like right now, Ryan, the only way Jaden Daniels does not win this award is if he gets injured like soon, like this week or next week.
Yeah, I think at this point he has to miss 3+ games for anyone to catch up. And it reminds me a bit of the Justin Herbert race where Justin Jefferson would have won that in most years, where Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers are guys that win the Rookie of the Year in a lot of years. But yeah, he's just an insurmountable force at this point.
Yeah, I don't even really have any other notes here. The only thought that I had, Mark, was that if something did happen to Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors could catch 110, 120 balls as a rookie, and he's like 40-1 you can find out there right now. So if Daniels did get hurt, I think it would probably be Neighbors for me, who what I would want, and he's 40-1. So, I don't like betting on guys with the only way they hit is if somebody in front of them gets hurt. That's like a really not a good way to bet. But that was my only thought. Any more thoughts here on offensive rookie of the year, Mark?
I agree. If I was betting on the injury, I'd want a skill position guy like Neighbors or Brock Bowers, just because I think, if they looked at the quarterbacks, I think it's going to be hard for Bo Nix or Caleb to even compare to Jaden Daniels, even if he does get injured. So I would like Brock Bowers at 40-1. I mean, he's top 10 in the NFL in receiving yards. He leads all tight ends in receiving yards. The Raiders have their bye this week, so maybe he gets the post-bye rookie bump. Kind of the biggest roadblock there is just the quarterback situation and the offensive state of the Raiders at this point. But yeah, you mentioned it. It's hard to imagine Jaden losing this, barring an injury soon. But I do think I would be in on Bowers in that case at 40-1.
I just think Neighbors over Bowers, just for like the big market, flashier guy, like in the voters' head. A lot of them are like from New York or whatever, But I agree with you. Bowers has been absolutely incredible. All right. Let's go to defensive rookie of the year. We also talk about this market, Ryan, where it's like nobody really knows who these guys are. And so it's really hard for any of the writers to really have a good take. However, there's been a lot of buzz around Jared Verse lately. Like I'm watching Red Zone. They're like, oh man, there goes Jared Verse again. He's having a great year. So to me, like even these writers who maybe are watching Red Zone or aren't following defensive rookie of the year that closely, I feel like at this point they know who Jared Verse is. And the Rams are starting to win and they getting held back. Like they're going to win a bunch more games, I think. So my first thought was maybe Jared Verse is too short here at minus 200. What do you think about defensive rookie of the year right now?
Yeah, I agree with all that. Like we always talk about, we're not trying to figure out who we think should win. We're trying to figure out who voters are going to vote for. And one of the biases for me is I watch every game, so I know things that other people don't. And you're right. At the end of the day, their writers are spending the least amount of time on defensive rookie of the year. Jared Verse has been the best rookie, but like you said, he's minus 200 and he only has 3.5 sacks. So you can catch him conceivably. His teammate, Brandon Fisk, I don't want anything to do with that. That's again, Verse has been a legitimate like top 12 type pass rusher this year. So just from that alone, I don't want that. I don't want Latu. Things are gonna have to change dramatically in the second half for him to catch Verse. But we talked about this a little while ago. I don't want Kalen Bullock at plus 1,200 because he was plus 7,500 a couple weeks ago. But he has 3 picks. He plays for the Texans. The Texans are going to get high profile games late in the year. So if he makes a few plays and Verse sits at like 5-6 sacks, he has a path. And the other one is Beanie Bishop. He has 3 interceptions as well. He had all of them in prime time against the Giants and Jets. You did this a couple years ago with Witherspoon, Adam, where prime time plays. It could put him in the conversation late, and they have a Week 17 game against the Chiefs. That's going to be a high profile game. So
nobody knows what team that guy plays for. What team? Yeah. What team does he play for? I guarantee the people. There's 50 voters for this award. I guarantee 50 of them don't know what team this guy plays for right now. Go ahead and educate them, Ryan, because I'll pretend that I actually know what team this guy plays for too.
He's a Steeler, and I agree. Those are 2 very fringe guys. That's why I mentioned the late season prime time games where they have a good enough foundation where if they do things late, they at least have a shot to catch Verse.
I'm curious for Ryan if this award has historical precedence, kind of like defensive player of the year, where it heavily leans towards pass rushers versus secondary players.
It's almost always a top of the draft pass rusher, but in this draft, there wasn't a defensive player taken until pick 15. So I think it's a little wider open than normal. But again, at this point, the season ended today. It's definitely Verse right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be sure you're reading Ryan's article. I took that. He had in the article that this is the stuff. This is why I say that awards market is the softest NFL market. There was a time when Ryan wrote the article like 2 weeks ago where Kalen Bullock was like 15-1 on one site and 75-1 on another site. You know, you just don't find that in the NFL ever. And that's like, that should be a flashing red light to everyone that this is a soft market. So yeah, I wish I knew more about defensive rookies because there's probably some value here. But for now, my lean is probably just look for the best price on Verse. I think there's a minus 175 out there on Caesars on Verse right now.
I do have to shout out Quinyon Mitchell since he hails from the MAC. You know, Adam, you get to shout out Penn State all the time. I'm a MAC product. We hardly get any of them in the NFL. So shout out Quinyon Mitchell. He is plus 900 on DraftKings and plus 2100 on FanDuel. So the Eagles, you know, how he plays for the Eagles, they have one of the softest schedules coming down the stretch. They get the Cowboys twice. Looks like they'll probably be without Dak Prescott the rest of the year. He doesn't really have any defensive statistics at this point. Doesn't have an interception or anything, but maybe he can get hot down the stretch. So I got to shout him out.
Yeah. I mean, you know, like when something's 9-1 on one side and 21-1 on another side, I don't automatically assume that the 21-1 is good. I would think through it first, but there's a much better chance, obviously, that it's good for sure. Okay. Offensive player of the year, which as we discussed last time, has turned into effectively fantasy player of the year. And you cannot deny right now that the two most valuable fantasy players this season by a mile are Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley. Derrick Henry, if the season ends today, I think would win this award over Saquon. You start to get into the MVP conversation, though, that I talked about, where are people going to vote for Derrick Henry for both OPOY and MVP? That's where I think the MVP case kind of loses some steam and why I would not take 40-1 on Derrick Henry right now. There'll be a lot of writers who say, I'm voting for him for Offensive Player of the Year. I'm not going to vote for him for MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. So, Ryan, what do you think about OPOY right now? There's really no one in the... I mean, they have JJF at 5-1, but to me, he should be way further behind Derrick Henry minus 145 and Saquon plus 215.
Yeah, just about every year, this ends up being a 2-horse race or maybe even a 3-horse race by the midseason point. I'm with you. I think it's Henry or Barkley. The only way anyone crawls back in is if, say, Jefferson has like a 250-yard game in the coming weeks, or if one of those guys gets hurt. And since they do play running back, that's definitely not off the table. But, you know, I legitimately think Henry could get MVP votes. So I'm staying completely away from this race because, like you said, too, he has the legacy component to him as well.
Yeah, I would not be laying money in this race on Derrick Henry. You know, we haven't seen hardly any running back injuries all year, but these are still 30-plus-year-old running backs or close to 30 years old running backs in Saquon's case who could get hurt at any time, and that would be a really big blow to their case here. I have a couple long shots, which I don't have a lot of conviction in, but I want to ask you guys about. But Mark, what do you think about OPOY right now?
You mentioned that the Justin Jefferson price seems off at 5-1, and I agree. Jamar Chase is 35-1 at some other books, and I didn't really understand the gap between those two. We're recording this on Thursday, November 7th, so before the Thursday Night Football matchup with the Bengals at the Ravens. But this is you know, kind of what Ryan alluded to. Maybe Jamar Chase can drop 150 plus yards and 2 touchdowns tonight, and he would be leading the NFL in receiving yards. So I think that is at least somewhat interesting. But yeah, it's really hard to see Derrick Henry or Saquon not winning at this point. So I just wanted to point out that price discrepancy. It didn't really match up to me.
Okay. I have some long shots here if you think that there is value in it. I don't really know because they're so far behind. But the ones that I saw that were 100-1 or better were Devon Achane at 100-1 with just outrageous explosive ability. Team isn't that good, though, and he's, you know, going to lose stuff to Tyreek and Waddle at some point. So 100-1 at least crossed my mind. Nico Collins has missed so much time, but he was on track to like be a major factor in this award before he went down. He's 150-1 now. Latest report, though, he's not even back in practice yet. So it's starting to get like he might be out of time. 151 might be bad because he's out of time. And then, speaking of out of time, the Debo splits without Brandon Ayuk are so ridiculous. I'm not saying that they're going to be sticky to that degree, but he is 200-1 is Debo Samuel to be the offensive player of the year. I don't think any of them are going to win it, but when you start getting into, you know, $100 to win 20,000 and stuff like that, I'm just like, God, I feel like one of those people that go to the lottery, go to like the 7-Eleven and buy a bunch of lottery tickets, but I can't help it. That's the kind of stuff that if I tell Silva, he gets to the full 3.9 inches too. Like it has a 0.1% chance of winning, but when you do win, feels really good. All right. Anything else on offensive player of the year.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw out Bijan Robinson at 50-1. His usage is trending up again. We've been talking about this since the beginning of the year. Falcons have a pretty good schedule going forward, so I do think there's at least a path to him catching those guys, unlikely as it is. And Adam, I don't have an issue with any of the guys you brought up. I think it all makes sense. The only caveat I'd say is, and you said this, is team success does matter in this race, so that probably does cross A-Chain off at this point.
Yeah, agreed. All right. Let's go to defensive player of the year, where TJ Watt, I mean, the broadcast just slobber all over this guy. I mean, oh, look, he's getting double teamed and he still got the swim move off. Oh, TJ Watt wrecked the whole game, which, you know, to his credit, he does wreck a lot of games. Like, I'm not saying that they're even wrong. He's minus 135. The second choice is Chris Jones, who I believe we talked about as a play at 12-1 last time. I've taken Nick Bosa here at 18-1. He's only 16-1 now, so not a lot of good movement for me there. I guess my lean right now, given the way the Steelers are playing, Reynolds, is that similar to the Jared Verse award, maybe TJ Watt is too short at minus 135. But yeah, what do you think about defensive player of the year right now, Ryan?
Yeah, like you said, the Steelers are 6-2. He's a brand name for one of the banner franchises, so it's going to be hard to catch him. Chris Jones, Mark brought this up, already good closing line value on him, but he only has 3 sacks, so he's going to have to really surge to get there. Dexter Lawrence is on a team that's 2-7. Will Anderson's in play. Trey Hendrickson, he leads the league in sacks right now, but even if the Bengals make the playoffs, does a pass rusher on one of the bottom 10 defenses get there? I don't think so. One long shot, because I get the Nick Bosa stance too. I think that has a path. I also think Fred Warner does too. Normally, I only bet on pass rushers, but if this is only a season where, say, Watt finishes with 15 sacks and Warner continues to put together the season he has and the 49ers win the West, I think he has a path at 35-1.
Yeah, it shouldn't be an award like who gets the most sacks gets the award, because Fred Warner should get some consideration. I just feel like they never give it to guys like that. But yeah, he's 35-1. Mark, any thoughts on defensive player of the year?
I think it's a little bit surprising that TJ Watt is the prohibitive favorite, just because he only has 6.5 sacks at this point. Trey Hendrickson leads the league at 11. But he has been close in recent years, and has not gotten the award. So I do think that compounding factor and the Steelers having one of the best defenses is why he's the favorite. Looking at long shots here, one that piqued my interest was Khalil Mack at 150-1 on FanDuel. It just seems like way too long of a price. The Chargers right now are allowing the fewest points per game in the NFL. They have a pretty favorable schedule down the stretch here. They get the Titans this upcoming weekend, who we know have a horrible pass rush, and they might be reinserting Will Levis there. And then Khalil Mack is at 4.5 sacks, so only 2 sacks behind TJ Watt, which could be made up in the course of one game. So I think he's interesting as a long shot, but otherwise, I'm pretty happy with the Chris Jones, like 10 or 12-1 that we got a month ago, and I'm sitting on that.
Yeah, I mean, 60-1 on DraftKings, 150-1 on FanDuel. Just, stuff that does not exist anywhere else. Okay. Last one here is Coach of the Year, where Dan Quinn is the prohibitive favorite right now at plus 180. Kevin O'Connell, Andy Reid, Jim Harbaugh, Dan Campbell, all in that 5-6-1 range. Now, what's interesting to me about this, Ryan, is that the defense has been okay for the Commanders. The real story is Jaden Daniels and the offense. Are we really going to give credit? Are the voters, I should say, really going to give credit to Dan Quinn for what Jaden Daniels is doing? Because, I'll take the L, man. I think Cliff's done a really good job. And when you have someone like Jaden Daniels, it's easy to do a really good job. I get that. But he's done a pretty good job. And that might take something away from Dan Quinn. So I do think Dan Quinn is a vulnerable favorite here at plus 180, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at. Do you agree there, Ryan? And any more thoughts on Coach of the Year?
Oh, 100%. It's like you pulled my perspective right out of my head. That's exactly how I see it. I don't think he's a cross-off, but Jaden Daniels is going to get the credit. So I think he's a very vulnerable favorite. With Kevin O'Connell, we talked about this a few weeks ago. Sam Darnold's starting to turn into a pumpkin. The defense has driven most of the success. I think they're going to fade. For Andy Reid, the Chiefs basically have to go undefeated. So I'm good there. You bring up a very good point with Jim Harbaugh. Usually, just teams with Justin Herbert as the quarterback don't usually win this award, but the media does love him. He's the football guy and all that stuff. So, they're going to finish with 10+ wins. So they're in. Dan Campbell, again, the Lions are a perennial contender now. He's a cross-off for me. The Steelers, it's a crime that Mike Tomlin's never won this award, but the Steelers made the playoffs last year. I don't think he's getting there. I think the Broncos fade with Sean Payton. And here comes the guys that I actually like. Jonathan Gannon with the Cardinals. We talked about this back in May. I thought the Cardinals were going to be like 3-6 at this point, and that they'd surge late. Them being 5-4 right now with their late season schedule, really good chance they make the playoffs. They're in the perfect position for a guy like him to win. I think you can get him at plus 1,800 on BetMGM.
Mm-hmm.
I think they might lose to the Jets, so I think my plan is I'm going to bet them on BetMGM now, and then if they lose to the Jets, maybe double down on them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also going to throw Sean McVay out there. The Rams are surging.
Yeah.
The Rams made the playoffs last year, but 2 of the last 3 winners, it's been more about overcoming in-season injuries than what it used to be, which is, being a bad team the year before and making the playoffs. So he's not a cross-up. I think he's dangerous too.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about the Jonathan Gannon one. That's an interesting one for sure. And yeah, Rams are starting to click, and I think McVay is interesting. I would probably, God, Ryan's not going to like it, but I like Mike Tomlin. And under the,
Dude, he should win.
Under the get in the voter's head, lifetime achievement award. Think what you went through. You came to this season with 2 quarterbacks the NFL didn't want. The NFL did not want Justin Fields. The NFL did not want Russell Wilson. And they're still one of the best teams in the league, And so I think he's going to get a lot of credit from those 2 factors. Lifetime achievement, not having a quarterback, and never having won this award as a third factor, right? So there's 10-1 out there right now on Mike Tomlin. I feel like if they win 12 or 13 games, I think he might get it, man. I really do. And I get what you're saying. They made the playoffs last year. They're always good. But I actually think Tomlin's done an incredible job this year also. And if I was going to have a vote myself, I might actually vote for him anyways. So, yeah.
And you have the factor of him replacing Justin Fields with Russell Wilson, which was, loudly gone against by the media, and everyone thought that was a bad idea, and it's turned out well. So if it continues to go well, I mean, that's an absolute turning point in the season for the Steelers and Mike Tomlin, I think.
Yeah, so that's my favorite one here is Tomlin. I believe there's a 10-1 out there somewhere. I'm probably going to take that after this show. Mark, any more thoughts on comeback player of the year? I might get some Gannon too. That's an interesting one for sure.
Yeah, Tomlin was my favorite on the board. I had tossed out Harbaugh at 17-1 a month ago. He's still probably my favorite at this point, but don't necessarily want to bet into it at plus 600. So I think the McVay one is interesting for sure, just given how wide open the NFC West is. Ryan wrote up both him and Gannon in the article last week, and since then Gannon has moved up in price and McVay has stayed the same. So I think that's somewhat interesting. They have so many young players on the defense. They've been battling through the Puka injury on offense and Cooper Kupp, and yeah, that division is just wide open. So if the Rams were to win that division, I could see it going to McVay. Just another feather in the cap too for Tomlin. There's a chance the Steelers can win the AFC North over the Ravens, one of the best teams in the NFL. So, I like those 2. I think the best on the board right now.
I would just note that Harbaugh is 12-1 on FanDuel. So 6-1 on DraftKings, and Harbaugh is 12-1 on FanDuel. Harbaugh 12-1. That's a pretty good number on Harbaugh right now. The voters love the khakis because they wear khakis. It's like they wear khakis and they love ball, and Harbaugh wears khakis and he loves ball. You know what I mean? This is the kind of stuff that you got to do. All right. Any more thoughts on any awards before we get out of here today, guys?
I hope Mike Tomlin wins Coach of the Year. So I don't hate what you said, Adam. I love it, actually. Maybe you fixed the comeback player of the year market. Maybe you'll fix this one too.
Yes. If anybody wants to listen to this show and then go make a scene on Twitter about guys being mispriced and refunding or whatever, shoot me a DM first, man. We can talk about it, all right? You don't need to blow up the market over all this stuff. All right. You can read Ryan's article about awards every other week on establishtheRun.com. You can find him on Twitter at Ryan Reynolds NFL, not to be confused with the actor who has intercourse with tons of women, Ryan Reynolds. We're talking about Ryan Reynolds NFL. And you can also find at Mark Dank, of course, at Adam Levitan, at Establish the Run. This was fun. For Reynolds. For Mark, for producer Luke, for producer Ryan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.